I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. I have a video as well, and it was supposed to be part of the slideshow, but for some reason PowerPoint didn't like my video. It won't go in the right place. So I'm going to try to breeze through this, and then I'll just start the video, and you guys can come up and take a look at things and touch things and ask questions then. Is that okay? Because the video's a little bit too long to show the whole thing, but you can watch it and talk and all that at the end. So, call it Tales from the Torture Chamber because I sit in a torch all day. And I'll show you pictures of what the torches are like and how we do it. I'm going to go into a little bit of glass history here. Actually, very little is known about the origins of glass. It's sort of a mystery that showed up over a few centuries. The first hints about it are from about 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. They think it was inspired by like working with ceramics and pottery, metalwork, and probably by accident. One group seemed to think that it came from cooking on the beach. The Phoenician sailors would stop at the beach and cook and use pottery, and then it would melt the sand underneath, but that's been debunked because it doesn't get hot enough to melt the sand. But they actually think it kind of developed organically, like in different places, you know, at a little bit at a time, and they started sharing like, oh, we found out it does this, and if you add this to it, you get color, and if you add this to it, it's stronger, and it just kind of grew. It developed as a unique substance. Nobody had seen anything quite like this. I mean, pottery was kind of dirty, didn't have quite the same chemical makeup. What was really exciting was when they discovered you could add metal oxides to create the colors. And the two most favorite ones were blues. They're still struggling to find a purple for us even to today that's a good purple. But using cobalt oxide and copper oxide, you can get these kind of colors. Now, of course, these aren't old pieces here, but I just want to show you the two colors that we were talking about. And then one thing they tried to do was imitate natural stones, semi-precious stones. Lapis was really a sought-after stone, as was turquoise. So all of a sudden the artists and the palaces and all could have those colors without the cost of actually having to get the stones. Now, the early controlled glasswork was done over an alcohol lamp. And today you'll even hear what I do referred to as lamp work glass beads. I haven't used a lamp in a long time. I use a special torch. It's an oxygen propane surface mixed torch. I'll have a picture of it in a minute here so I can show you. Believe it or not, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of different specially made glass bead torches. It's that big an industry. Okay, this was just for fun. I found this online, and it's an early glass recipe. And the reason I have the Pinterest thing up there is because it reminded me of Pinterest. You know, when you find a recipe, but you have to read about what their dog did that morning, and you know what it was doing 6 years ago, and how they feel and stuff. And the recipe's like you scroll and you scroll. That's kind of how this was, because over here the first part was, when you set upon the foundation of kiln to make glass, you first search in a favorable month for a propitious day, and only then set upon the foundation of the kiln. And then it goes through about you regularly perform libation offerings before the Koba images, and on the day when you plan to place the glass in the kiln, you make a sheep sacrifice, and I cut that part out. Over here is the actual recipe, and a lot of this over here I'm not going to go into, but it's the same thing we use today. Sand, certain types of ash, different oxides, and this goes into how you get the fire to go and everything. I buy mine. There are people who actually still make their own glass, but I'm not patient enough for that. Okay, a quick story of how we got to where we are today. About 2,000 years ago, glassmaking made its way to Europe, and it ended up mainly in Italy for a couple of reasons. There was a high concentration of people who landed there because it was an island. And secondly, they could put these huge glass-making places in the middle of the water on an island so it didn't burn down a city. That was a real problem. Still is. Every once in a while they have a big fire. But in the 1600s, Venice became a major glass capital. They supplied the whole world. And they were so secretive of what they did that the workers there were under the threat of either dismemberment or death if they shared any of their secrets. Okay, that's a pretty good reason not to. However, eventually, some of the people escaped there and went north as far as Germany. They ended up in Lauscha, Germany. Lauscha is a capital where they make a lot of the glass German ornaments, and these people found work, which energized the German glass industry, and Lauscha is now a major capital. So, in the 1800s, Native Americans were trading for glass beads with the European settlers. That was a big changeover. And in the 50s and 60s, in the United States, the studio glass movement started. And by studio glass, I mean people who had a studio at home and a burner, and they got glass and they melted it. Now, nobody really knew what they were doing, but everybody was trying. And there wasn't the communication that we have now, so people were like in their little cocoon there, melting and learning and coming up with tools. And eventually, some of them came up with some pretty good ways to do things. However, in the 1980s, the Society of Glass Bead Makers was formed, which is now the International Society of Glass Bead Makers, which was started as an American group who, enough people on the West Coast did this that they got together and started sharing ideas, techniques, tools they'd come up with. Some of them were building their own torches, and they shared ideas on that. It's kind of like PC work now. You know, people talk about how they build PCs and different things they can do. In the 1990s, God bless the internet, that caused a huge boom because all the stuff that had been secret and then hard to disperse hit the internet. And everybody wanted to make glass beads. It seems like a lot of people, I mean, probably not to you, there's probably about 3,000 or 4,000 of us in the world. But this gave an opportunity to share ideas and to say, oh, if you put this glass with this oxide, with this glass that has this metal in it, and melt them together, you get a new color in between them, or a new reaction, or it looks, you'll get a new green instead of the pink and the green that you put together. You may get a totally different kind of green. And just as an aside here when I'm talking about it, when you put glass together, it doesn't mix like paint. Red and blue do not make purple. Because of the metals, they'll react to one another, and you'll get some other odd color based on whatever they've got in those two colors. Later on, Europe and the Asian countries got involved in glass bead making, and now it's a worldwide industry. Russia is really big, Germany. The United States is kind of floundering a little bit. We kind of had so many people doing it for a while that it was hard to sell your work, so a lot of people are hanging up their torch and going on to do something else, which, yay for me, I'm sticking with it. Okay, today we have national and international conventions, several online groups on Facebook, Instagram, lots of other places. Regional retreats. I help co-host a retreat twice a year in Asheville, North Carolina. We have 30 different artists who show up from all over the country, plus a couple from Europe. 3 days of just making glass and having fun. There are several glass and tool suppliers. This is probably one person's rack of glass right here. That looks like heaven to me. I would love to have a rack of glass like that. And then there are dozens of specialty torches for beadwork. And guys, if you have any questions, holler them out. I'm trying to buzz through this so I can get to the video. Okay, so how far we've come. I want to show you some of the things that people are making now with glass. These are some other artists I really admire. Brad Pearson, I'm glad to say he's a personal friend of mine, does these beautiful pieces. They're huge. This is a marble. And this is my friend Barbell. She does a lot of sculptural pieces. Now the glass that we use, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, is not made for doing this. It's soft glass. It's made for making round beads. So pushing the envelope. Astrid Rydell is a South African artist, and she uses enamels on her beads. And I still don't know how she does this. I've seen her do them, but I still don't know how she makes them work like this. This is Ali Vandegrift. She's in the Pacific Northwest. She was 20 years old. She decided she wanted to learn to blow glass. She made scientific glass in college, ended up working for Oak Ridge Laboratories doing specialty scientific glass. And she started making these beads, and that's That bead is probably this big. She uses probably, I think it's 4 rods of glass, which I'll show up here to make the base, and then does the decoration. The drawings on there are thin, hair-thin pieces of glass that she draws with, which is very, very difficult because it melts as fast as you put it on, so you have to get just at the right speed, and you have to draw with both hands, basically. You're drawing with the base and with the stringer to get it to go where you want it to go. The glass she used on this particular one is one that's impregnated with silver, so it's got that nice shiny surface to it. And this is Holly Cooper. I just had a class with her not too long back. She uses a lot of enamels and does a lot of stringer work there. That's 3 views of the same bead. She likes to make, she calls them Phoenician beads. And just to go backwards just a little bit, this is where we came from. These are some early beads here. And then these are some Murini beads, which we'll talk about in just a moment, slices of glass that's been put together. But you can see how far the techniques have come and how clean the work is.
Yes.
Okay, the types of glass. This is one of mine right here. This is actually a sculpture. It's a little Christmas tree stand and then crystal Christmas fish on top. It was a special order. There are basically 2 kinds of glass that are used to make beads, either borosilicate or soda lime glass. Borosilicate is, some of you may be old enough to remember going to a fair or a mall and seeing people making little animals out of clear glass, and they would lay them on the counter and let them cool off, and then you could buy them. That's a totally different glass than what I use. That is similar to what your Pyrex dishes used to be made out of. And it's got a different coefficient of expansion than the soda lime glass, which just means it's a number aside of the glass that tells you how much the glass shrinks as it cools off. And your glass, you can't mix 2 different COEs because you'll get stress and the glass bead will break. Soda lime is the traditional Venetian round bead glass. Again, it's usually made for round beads. It's manufactured in Italy, Germany, China, Czech Republic, India, and the United States. All have different companies that make the glass. Interesting that there used to be a Chinese company that made glass. It was really horrible. A woman from Canada started a company. She bought one of the horrible companies in China. She runs it like a Western company. And they now have some of the finest glass you can find. And she's very, very good to her workers too, so we like to support them. But their glass is really expensive. The glass that I use begins to move in the torch around 1,000 degrees, becomes molten around 12 or 1,400, depending on what's in the glass, what kind of metals or whatever they use. And my torch goes up around to about 2,000 degrees. I hardly ever use it that hot unless I am making some borosilicate work. The glass can be transparent, meaning you can see through it, clear, or a color that you can see through. It can be opaque, which in the glass world is called a pastel, and you'll be corrected by the old school people if you call it opaque. Striking, which means it starts out as one color, but when you heat it in the flame and let it cool, and then heat it again and take it out of the flame, it turns bright red or bright orange or bright yellow. Those are fun. And then the oxides and the opacifiers they put in the glass make every single color feel different in the flame. White glass, when you put it in the flame, we call it baby snot, because as soon as it gets hot, it just drips everywhere. You have to really learn to work with it. And if I can get the video to work, I'll be making a fish and you can see some of the white glass. It turns absolutely clear while you're working with it, and as it cools off, it turns white again. Some of the stiffer glasses, like I think there's some cobalt blue going around that's transparent. That stuff is horrible to melt because it's just so sticky. There's so much stuff in it to make it that deep, rich blue that you can hardly get it to melt. And you have to be careful with the different colors because some colors do burn. Yellows will bubble. Reds will get what we call liver spots on them. It's a constant learning curve. Every time you pick up glass, a new color, you have to play with it, see what it does. And then if you're going to put it with another glass to make a decoration on it, you may have to try the 2 together to make sure that they will work together.
I remember in high school chemistry class, they had us doing some basic glass work, tubing, making specialized shapes of the tubing.
Right, right. That's how that Brad Pearson, who made the big marble, he got his start. And we have a lot of folks who started in scientific glass that have moved over to the art world. I guess they were making too much money in the
Here.
Oh, yes.
Question, so you specifically mentioned the availability of soda lime glass,
Mhm.
and, as I understand, borosilicate glass is not that available after, as of a couple of years ago, once Pyrex was kind of dissolved and bought by a British company or whatever.
Yeah.
What is that like nowadays? I mean, like, is borosilicate available if you wanted to do
Yeah.
a party
Oh, yeah.
scientific?
The company I get most of my glass from is Mountain Glass Arts in North Carolina, and they specialize in borosilicate glass. They get a lot of Simex. That's the more expensive. They have some Chinese borosilicate clear. I mean, usually you're going to do something simple with that. I'm not sure where the color borosilicate comes from. It has always been very expensive and very fickle. You don't know what color you're really going to get till it comes out of the kiln. So, but yeah, it was a big problem when the borosilicate market or the supplier dried up from the other. Okay, we talked about the torches. This is the Nortel Minor Burner. This is like the Toyota Corolla of glass bead making torches. It's not fast, it's not hot, it's not sexy, but it'll run every time you turn it on, and it melts beautifully. I don't know how many of these we own, probably 15 or 16 of them, because I teach classes and I take them to the classes. And you throw them in a box and you take them to the next class, and you take them out and clamp them to the table, hook them to the hoses of oxygen and propane, and they fire right up. So they're great little torches. This is called the Cricket. I think this is cute, and I always think of Men in Black. Remember the little gun, the Cricket? That's what it reminds me of. This is the Bethlehem Champion, and you can see it's got two hoses. The two red are for the propane, and the two green are for oxygen. That just gives you more oomph. You can belt bigger stuff. And as the torches get bigger, we refer to them as compensation torches. This is a Barracuda. Not many people need this much firepower, but people buy them. This torch right here, the one I told you, the first one, the minor, is about $200, and this one's about $1,500 to $2,000, depending on what whistles you get with it. The Bethlehem stacks, which is interesting. If you notice, it's actually two torches. Yeah, it's got the big one for actually melting the glass, and then the tiny one up there for doing detail work. Now, somebody doing this kind of stuff couldn't do what I do because they'd have too much fire going on. I actually work with a real tiny flame, and I like to work slowly. And then you get to the mega miner. This looks like it's going to take over the world. And these are interesting. I threw this in because the Japanese have a kind of glass that's a totally different COE than anybody else. It's got a very high COE, so it stays malleable for a long time. It's so soft when you melt it that you can basically hold it over a candle and it'll start to move. It won't melt completely, but it will actually move. And we're talking the rods like they're going around there. So they use what's called a volcano torch. The flame comes straight up, but you notice there's no place for oxygen. Right here's a little nozzle, and what they do is they hook an aquarium pump to it, and that just keeps the flame going straight. When I work with my flame, and you'll see if I can get the video going, when I light it up, I turn it on, and it's just a messy propane flame, and it's going everywhere. It won't melt the glass, it'll just get it all sooty and make it warm. But when I add oxygen to it, it cleans up the flame and makes it burn very, very straight and clean, and it'll take all the soot right off the glass. There's my baby, the Bethlehem Alpha. I love this torch. With this particular one, I can have the flame up big, and I could do like borosilicate icicles and things like that. Or I could turn it down and do what I like to do is very, very tiny detailed work. Like I've got some little tiny dots up here, and I've got a seashell that's got a crab living inside of it, and I did him with that little tiny flame. The basic tools that I use, and I have some of this up here, the mandrels. People say, how do you get the hole in the glass? I kind of start with a hole, which is the mandrel, and put the glass around it. These are stainless steel 316L uncoated welding rods. Stainless steel, like I said. They're dipped in this clay mixture, which is like a clay slip, just a watery clay mixture that's got graphite in it. The end of it's dipped, and everybody always says, why do you have those sparklers? Because that's exactly what it looks like, sparklers. That dries, and then you make the bead onto where that clay slip is, and that causes it to slide off when it's done. If I did it right on the metal rod, it would stick to the metal and break. So this is like spraying your rod with Pam, making brownies. The glass rods, which just went around here, and then the paddle over there is graphite. When we're shaping and making long skinny beads and we roll the glass, you don't want a tool that's going to suck the heat out of the glass. If you use brass, it's going to cool it off too fast and put stress in it. Graphite tends to not soak up the heat so quickly, and you have more working time. And then on the end here, these glasses, we call these birth control glasses because nobody looks sexy in them. They're actually a special coating. It's called didymium. And when you put the glass into the flame, there's a sodium flare that is an intense yellow, like hurt your eyes yellow. It won't damage your eyes like some of the borosilicate can. It's so bright you can actually burn your retinas. With the soda lime glass, it's more of a hindrance. It's so bright and so yellow that you can't see what you're doing. So when you put these glasses on, it's like magic. It's always funny to have visitors to the studio and say, okay, put on the glasses and be safe, and they're working and I say now look over your glasses, and they raise it up, and everybody always, oh, wow, because it's just this intense yellow. There are better looking glasses than that, but not much. I actually work with a little bit of borosilicate, so I have a flip-up shade that's darker, so I could be working on my soft glass and then decide to make some icicles out of the boro, flip it down, and I've got the stronger protection. Some things that we use, frit is just ground up glass blower's glass. It's very, very concentrated. You can make your own, but there's a couple companies that make it. This is Val Cox's line. She has lots more than this, where she's come up with mixes of glass that complement one another or do things in the flame.
And people, when you have bowls of frit out, they want to come right up and go with their finger.
Yep.
Ouch.
Yes. So Terry's constantly telling them not to. One of the coolest things, she was doing a demo one time in Scottsboro, and
Alabama.
I mean, actually torches outside. She has a shield up, and she's actually making the beads so people can see it. A couple little kids come up. What's the first thing they want to do? Reach for the flame. Terry went, caliente, muy caliente. Their eyes got about that big and went, basically you could see it. Gray-headed woman speaks Spanish. Who would have thunk? You know? It was so cool, because they were not expecting Spanish.
We talked about how what's in the glass makes different things happen, and I just pulled out an example. This particular frit's called Aqua Violet, and that's just, Val came up with a name for it. That's what it looked like to her. And she made it on these different beads. Those are all the same frit on different base beads. So what you do is you make your bead and then you roll it in some frit and melt it in. Easiest bead you can make. So it's just kind of interesting that when you put it on different colors, it does different things. And some of the glass is really, really drastic about what it does.
Does the color tend to somewhat blend with the color of the underlying glass?
Sometimes, and sometimes it reacts horribly. Like ivory colored glass, if you put what's called a reactive color on it, it turns to mud. It just doesn't look like anything. Sometimes you get whole new colors. Sometimes you get, there's a purple glass we have, which I said they're still trying to get a good purple. It's an opaque purple, number 862 is the number of it, but we call it EDP, Evil Devitrifying Purple, because when you put it in the flame and work it, it causes crystal growth, and it's like a white frost comes out on the surface of the glass. And then you have to reheat it, make it go back in. But you got to try to turn it and reheat everything exactly the same amount. And it's really hard to do. But yeah, it usually you try to get something that either blends or highly contrasts, especially when you're making dots and specific dots.
Well, maybe you say ouch when you mentioned the frit, was I figured that would probably be lots of little sharp.
It's broken glass. And it can be either like almost like enamel, or it can be great big chunks. You can get it different sizes. Okay, Murini. This is one of my favorite things to make, and it's very, very time consuming. You can take your glass and make, these are rods that someone has made where they made a gather of glass, which is a blob of glass, and they took another rod of glass and drew those little curved lines with it real thick. And then they encased it, meaning they wrapped glass around it. And then they had it on a handle here, and they took another rod of glass and stuck it to it, and they turned it, and it might be this big. And they turn it, when it gets hot all the way through, they start pulling and pulling and pulling until it narrows down and gets as small as they want, and then they clip it off. And you can cut it into these little slices right here, and then make a bead and adhere it to the bead, and it looks like roses. These down here are a different kind of Murini. And then some folks have a lot of fun with doing little cartoon characters and things. So it all depends on what you want to spend the time learning to do. I've got some samples of some Murini up here. You may have seen this floated around on Reddit for a while, and it's been in the news a lot, all those, wow, have you seen this kind of things. This is Lauren Stump's work. And like over here, this is a close-up. You can see the detail in there. This slice, they've sliced it off, is about that big.
Wow.
About $500 a slice.
Quarter of the picture.
Yeah. What happens is, he had to do that, like I told you how the rose was made, all those layers, and you pull it out real skinny. He does that with each individual part, each eyeball, each nose, each mouth. He has to pull out like that, and then go back and put them together and melt them again and pull them out. So it takes ages to do something like this. If you take a class with Lauren Stump, you basically work from 8 a.m. to whenever you finish the next morning, because there's just so much to do. You can actually see on this one right here the clear glass where it was pulled. So I don't do that. I'm going to give a quick shout out right now to Beads of Courage. It's a group that we support, all bead makers. Beads of Courage gives handmade beads to kids who have catastrophic illness as a way for them to record and tell their stories. When you're 4 and you're in the hospital for a year, you really don't know how to explain that, but if you have a little yellow bead for every time you got a shot, and a black bead for every night you were in the hospital, and a glow-in-the-dark bead for whenever you got an x-ray, I mean, they go on and on and on. When the kids hit a milestone, they get a dream bead, they get sent off to a bead artist and have a specialty bead made. And if a child passes, we make butterfly beads for the parents. It's an awesome, awesome program, so if you're ever looking for someone to support, I'm going to throw this out there. Wonderful, wonderful people, beadsofcourage.org if you want to take a look. And I got a few of my pieces going here. I'm going to try to get the video going. Any questions before I step forward? Okay.
The small glass I'm handed out to y'all is twisted.
Yes, and there's going to be one made in the video if you get the video to work.
Right. If it doesn't work, you take 2 or 3
Or 40.
pieces of glass, get them hot, get them connected to each other, twist them as you pull them out to get them that small. Then Terry will use them to literally, well, what I say, draw on the glass. So that feather is glass, just like this is. Or to do the little black rings around, that would just be a plain full black one. But shows you all the different things. I'm talking so you can get your video.
I was up to see a couple of things. If you would like to come up and take a look at any of the stuff, I've got examples of frit and mandrels and jars that I've blown. We do that. I actually take a piece of stainless steel brake line, dip it in the clay mixture, wrap the glass on the end and blow it. So it's like you've seen the people on TV blow the great big ones. Okay. So any questions? Okay. Give me just a minute here and I'll try to get this video going.
If you're interested in the big blown stuff, a lot of times you think about blowing glass. I would recommend Orbit's Hot Glass. It's in Fort Payne, Alabama. He's been on, when Oprah had her show, he was on twice as a
Favorite things.
Yeah, favorite things. And Christmas is getting here, you can actually go there and they have bowls of frets laying out. You pick out the fret you want. They will gather the glass on the blowpipe and let you blow into it to expand it. And yes, Chattanooga, Asheville, a bunch of them in Asheville does that one. And then they roll it and fret and do all that stuff.
No. No, I say too many bad things, so I'm working towards you to listen. Okay, so this is my little alpha right here. I've got some white glass, and with the soda lime, with borosilicate, you can just stick in the flame and take off. With borosilicate, it's fussy, so you have to kind of tease it into the flame, like sticking your toe in a hot tub of water.
Would you say that the alpha that you have is a good beginner's torch?
Yes, yes. There are torches you can get at like Hobby Lobby that are like $75. They're frustrating, and you actually use a can of matte glass and hook it on the table so you're sitting there with a bomb in your lap. Yeah. These torches are much safer, and you learn them much, much quicker on these. Okay, there's the white glass. You can see it kind of turn clear. I'm going to pull a stringer.
One time Terry was teaching a scientific glass blower how to do the soft glass. And like she said, he was used to borosilicate, just stick it in the flame. And she kept warning him, you can't do that with soft glass. You have to tease it. Well, about the second time I heard her say that, I started backing away. And I saw Terry backing away. Lo and behold, a few seconds later, tip of that just blew up. And he went, oh, I see what you mean now.
So I pulled the stringer out skinny and laid it over to the side. This is one of the stainless steel mandrels. I have some of those up here. They come in different sizes. I've got little tiny ones I use for jewelry, and then these bigger ones I use for like blowing the little jars on them or making Pandora beads. Okay, so I'm going to start to make the bead. I've heated up the mandrel. And the tricky thing about this that everybody's always surprised about is when I teach a class, it's the first day of class, I'll tell people, okay, here's your homework for tonight. Take this rod and learn to roll it in your hand so you can keep it moving continuously and level. And then, after you learn to do that, do the other hand too. Most people can do one hand. And then after you get that, now do it backwards, come towards you. So you have to learn to feel how the glass is weighted on there as to whether to go forward or backwards. What I've done here is I've made a wrap around and made it like a disc bead. Can you see it's kind of like a rope wrapped around the mandrel? And I'm going to put a little dot here on the end so that you can see how slowly I'm turning it and when I turn it. It's a little hard to tell, but can you see that little dot on the end there? And switching over to my right hand because I can balance a little bit better. Now I'm heating the outside edge of that disc, just the outer edge, because when you heat glass, it has an interesting property. It wants to be round. So if you can balance it, it's going to turn into a ball as you're working. So I'm trying to heat the outer edge and have it sink down on itself so that it's a big fat round rope around that mandrel, which is what makes the bead. A lot of the shaping is done outside the flame. That's always surprising to people who try this when they first start out. They think you've got to get it in the flame and get it soupy hot, and then it gets floppy and it starts to spin out of control. You learn to turn it, get it bright orange like this, and come out of the flame and keep turning, and the glass will continue to settle down. It's all about heat, gravity, and heat control.
You're wearing your glasses so you don't see that bright yellow.
Actually, that's with the glasses. You're looking through a didelium flame. It's probably 3 or 4 times that bright without it. And like I said, it won't hurt your eyes, but you'll be really, really tired and your eyes will be dry very quickly. Okay, can you see how that melted down into like basically what we call a rondelle shape or a donut shaped bead? Now real quickly, if you want to be a bead snob, I'll tell you what one thing to look for when you look at beads. Around the hole, if we've got the bead laying here and the hole is on top, the sides of the bead should come up and dip down so that the hole is in a little valley. 2 reasons. One, it protects whatever you string it on. If it's straight up and down, it makes a saw out of it. And if you make sure it's got the pretty little valleys on each end, that shows you had the workmanship to make it like you wanted. You'll accidentally get those sometimes, but if you consistently get those on your bead, it's a sign of good workmanship. Here I'm putting dots on the bead. I took that stringer, just heat up the glass and put the little dots on there. I'm going to go back over here and put it on the side in an alternating pattern. I talked about Brad Pearson, the one with the big marble I showed you first. He taught me how to put dots on, and he's so in tune, he actually does it between heartbeats to get it hit at the right place. I hold my breath when I do it. I have a little pattern I do where I touch, and it's a good pattern to get into, a good rhythm when you put the dots on, because that's harder than it looks, to get them in the right place and get the right amount each time. And you've probably seen beads like this with the little rows of dots on them. And that one needed a little more. So I'm going to turn it in the flame and try to heat just the dots. I've got my base the way I want it. I don't want to melt it again. I want to keep it warm though. If I let that base cool off, it's going to break in half or explode.
Are you
So-
spinning it a lot faster than normal with the
I am
dots?
now, because I'm trying to heat the little dots, and I'm trying to get the heat to do the same all the way around pretty quickly. And when you first put the dots on, with a tippy toe, they stand up like this, and what I want to do is heat them enough that they spread out, make a dome, because if they're tippy toe up on the end of the ball, if you bump it, they'll fall off. You want as much of that area touching the base as possible.
Do you have to use a higher melting point glass for the initial
No,
shape? Or?
no. Bless you. Allergic to glass? Now, as you melt those dots, they sink in or smooth out. So I can leave the dots standing up, or I can melt them until they're actually smooth with the surface of the bead. And right there, I'm just trying to check and make sure everybody's melted in. You can see the dots disappear. They turn clear, and then you come out of the flame and they turn back to white. So when I see that clear where the white should be, I know that how hot it is. It's extremely running hot. There you go. All the dots are disappearing. I'm trying to melt them in, and then they come back. And then once I'm happy with that, I'll grab some black. I was trying to get colors you could see on the video. And come back in and put a dot on top. Now you notice these little handlebars I have right here? Those are just little wrist rests, and they're not firmly in position. I describe those like when you go down your stairs at home and you put your hand on the rail. You don't give it a death grip. You just kind of lightly put your hand on it to kind of get your balance, you know, as you trot down the stairs. That's kind of what these do. They let me put my hands in a single location, and that way I'm not moving them without realizing it. So there's a little black dot right on top of the white ones there. And then when I finish a bead, it goes into a kiln. If I were to put that down on the table or in a bucket of sand or vermiculite to let it cool, there's a lot of stress in the bead. When you put the bead in the flame, you get it really, really hot, so those molecules are really going crazy. And then you pull it out to decorate it, and they freeze it and shake. And then you put your decoration on, and you go back into the flame, and they start moving again. And once they're so excited, you can never get them lined up again, so there's a good network holding that bead together. So what I do is take it, when I'm finished, put it in a kiln. It sits at 960 degrees for an hour, which is just below the melting point. And it lets that bead get to exactly the same temperature all the way through. And then my kiln steps down. It cools off over several hours, so that it's a very slow cooling process. Your craft store beads, they don't do that. They're just stuck in sand, if anything, or they're just They make them on the rod and throw them in a pile.
So basically an annealing process.
It's an annealer, yes. Okay, I'm gonna try to speed this up a little bit. I'm making a twisty. I've got a metal rod with none of the clay slip on it. And I'm putting some pea green, or as we call it, Kermit green. And I'm just putting a ball on the end of it. I'm gonna try to speed this up because I realized I was putting a lot of stuff on here. I came back in after I made the ball and I put 2 white stripes. Can you see that on there? And I'm gonna come back and put some turquoise stripes on it. And I think I actually ended up putting a little bit of black on there too. Yep, there's the black. When you're working with glass that thin, you gotta learn neat techniques to get it to go where you want it to go without melting in half. And then I'm gonna take another, no, I'm sorry, I'm fixing the black right there. That's why we're getting sticky. I took another metal rod, heated the end of it, and stuck it into the glass. So I've got a handle on either side. Those are called punties. And now I'm turning my hands together. You see the lines are staying kind of straight on the colors. And I'm going back and forth. And what I'm trying to do is get the heat to cook all the way through. I tell my students it's like cooking a chicken. If you put it on a rotisserie and spin it really fast, you can burn the outside and still have raw chicken in the middle. What you want to do is, with this, is turn it slowly, let the heat soak through. And you see how it's turning orange all the way through now. There aren't any real dark spots in it.
It's probably a dumb question, but how do you keep the heat from transferring to your?
The stainless steel rods won't transfer heat, and glass doesn't transfer heat. It's there's some ambient heat to the side, but it's not hot. And then I'm turning one hand in one direction, one in the other. And I have some samples of this up here. I love making these. And you have to like turn fast and pull apart, and turn fast and pull apart, and then the glass says, I'm done. It firms up and tells you when it's done. If you twist too far, it'll break. But so you can see how firm it is. I've let go with the other hand now. Oh, no, I haven't. Lied to you. I'm going to burn it off in there. Sometimes it breaks off on one end whenever you're doing that. And we'll superheat that and stick it with water. That glass will shock and break off, and I can use that metal rod again. And with the other side, I have to take my very specialized Ace Hardware pliers and dip them in water. Yeah. If it doesn't melt, we'll use it for a tool. Okay, fish sculpting. I speeded this up a little bit. I'm trying not to keep you guys too late. I took one of my stainless steel rods, dipped it in the clay mixture, but I'm working off the end. I'm making a sculpture, so I'll do this with one hole in the bottom of the fish, then make a stand and set him on top of it. But I'm just making a ball of glass there. And you can see this kind of turn into a ball pretty quickly. Remember, the white melts really, really, really fast, so it's going to firm up into, or shape up into a ball. See how round that is already?
This has been the best part for you.
Wow. Bus must have come in. Okay, so this is nice and warm now, and I'm going to heat it up a little bit. And see the red up there in the little bowl? That's frit.
It's what?
Frit, the ground up glass we talked about, the colors, intense colors. So I'll get that nice and warm, and I'll go in and get some frit. And then just put it back in the flame and melt it in. And that just gives a nice model decoration. And I'm going to scoot forward just a little bit. I've shaped the glass by holding it in the heat and letting one side droop down, and I turned over and let the other side droop down, so I've got a fish body shape. And
Do you sing at home while you make it?
I do. Sometimes I sing out loud.
That's good.
Keeps me from cursing most of the time. Okay, so there I put some eyeballs on, or at least bases for the eyeball. Just a little bit of black on there to give me a pad to put it on. And that's just a little metal tool I use to match the dot down and make it a flat circle.
That's what my eyes look like this morning.
Don't put them in the flame. Okay, so I came back through here and I put some white on. Okay, and then come back and put a little dot of black. You can see his personality starting to come out. And then we'll put a clear lens over each eye, just to magnify it and make it look fishier. You have to make sound effects when you work with glass too. Okay, here I'm putting this, I guess her lips on. I used a bright red and I put a big ball of glass on the end. Looks like she's blowing bubble gum. And I'm going to heat it up and take my trusty knife. Come on, hurry. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to heat it up and then tilt it back on top so that it melts down. It doesn't like stretch out, because it will just stretch out and drip. Okay, so I've got my trusty little knife and I go in and cut that in half and rock it back and forth. And all of a sudden she's got big, luscious lips. Fish lips. I call these botoxic guppies. Okay. That took a minute, didn't it?
Guppy Kardashian.
There you go. Carpdashians. You get what you pay for. Okay. So now I'm going to go in with a little bit of clear, and I'm going to put a stripe down and back.
We're laughing, that was fine.
And I'm going to put some on the tail. And if you see, I keep going back in the flame. I've got to keep that glass warm, so I've got to in and out of the flame to keep it warm. And I'm going to scoot it forward just a little bit because I put big, thick stripes on the back and the tail. And
Do you have that one here? As an
I
example?
don't, and I don't know that I have a fish with me. We were going to go by the studio and pick it up on the way, and we got to running late and just didn't get it. Okay, so you can see that's big, thick on the back there. And now I'm taking my pliers, my handy dandy Ace pliers, non-serrated pliers. I'm heating all of this, and because the fin and tail are really thin, I have to be careful about heating it. I've got to keep it warm, but I can't get it too hot or it's going to melt and sink into the other, but I want to keep it from breaking. So I'm heating up the back fin. I'm going to take my pliers. This is an ooh-ah moment. And pinch the pliers and just go around the edge. Those are new pliers. That's
Ruffling
what
it a little bit.
Pardon?
Now when you're ruffling the fin.
Yeah, I'm
a little
ruffling
bit.
the fins on it with the pliers. There we go. And so spin that around so it gets warm. And the mantra right here is don't break, don't break, don't break. And
Then you, have you ever put too much glass on a rod and then you just go bloop?
oh yeah, oh yeah. You're only getting the glamour shots here. You're not getting to see the ones that. We have a technique where a bead goes bad. We've got a cup of water for putting like little bits of glass in and stuff. And sometimes we call it water annealing. If one just goes south so far it can't be saved, just whoosh. And it's quite a satisfying sound when you had a naughty bead and you get to give it a burial at sea.
Wow.
Okay, so you can see there the little ruffled feathers, and then fins, and then I'll go in. I like to go one step farther and actually twist them a little bit so it gives motion, so it looks like the fish is in water. It's kind of got some motion to it.
I'm guessing you sell some of these.
Hopefully, yes, because it's an expensive hobby. My glass. A lot of people ask about the glass. The glass runs about $10–12 a pound, which is about 20 sticks, foot-long sticks. Depending on what's in it, that's pretty cheap. There's some that's $100 a pound. You use that very sparingly. But there's the fish.
Ta-da.
There you go. Just before going in the fish fryer. And I'm trying to spin it fast just to get a little heat in there before it goes in the kiln. And that's it. Oh, and my glasses. Ta-da, I'm done.